Welcome to the Elevated Trader Podcast. I am Dr. Kristen Kidgel.
And I am Tracy Ball. Join us every week as we journey into becoming better traders.
We believe becoming better traders involves elevating our skill, mindset, and our health. In each episode, we will discuss the current book we are exploring, and we invite you to join us on this journey.
Are you ready to elevate your trading, mindset, and health to the next level? Let's do this.
Welcome back to the Elevated Trader Podcast. We are in part 4 of the Fit for Life books 1 and 2, by the way. I'll explain that again later. And these books were written by Harvey and Marilyn Diamond. How's it going, Tracy?
It's going great. Going great. Love this book. Have you started it? Like actually doing the program?
Not really, technically not. But I read the book a long time ago, so I've already had a lot of it in play for a while. But
This
I'm not
is
as
true.
strict as you, because you're actually like super strict on it. I have been super strict, but then you get a little lenient.
Yeah,
You can go back to it.
yeah, and that's what they say, right? That's one of the things that I really like about this. First of all, it's not a diet. This is education for eating habits that are based around food combining. That's what my book. So you mentioned
That's right.
earlier that we're in part 1 and part 2. So I'm reading part 1, correct? You're reading part
Correct.
2? And
Book
mine
2,
is
yep.
focused, mine's focused all around the dietary aspects of Fit for Life. Yours is much more encompassing, and I'm looking forward to reading yours because I have not seen anything from your book. So I'm just implementing the strategies that I'm finding in my own book. So the book that I'm reading is really just about educating you around the information that's available regarding digestion and food and how you can combine
Anatomy.
foods for proper energy. So I mentioned this before in a prior episode that, don't take my word for it. Don't take Kristen's word for it. The only way that you're going to know whether something is right is if you try it for yourself. The information that I'm reading makes complete sense. I understand it, but I am not a geneticist. I'm not a dietitian. I am not a doctor. I am not well-versed in physiology. I can't prove any of the claims that the book's making other than by doing it, seeing how I feel, and if it makes a difference, great.
Right, exactly. And
So that's what I'm doing.
Yep, and I can vouch for that. You definitely do feel better. But I love the parts that they, in the beginning especially, where they discuss not just the anatomy, but the physiology. Like, why do cells do what they do? And why do organs do what they do? And what does it all mean? And breaks it down in super simplified manner that you can really wrap your head around it easily. I thought your book was an easy read. This one actually is too. I want to say that the first 4 chapters of this are an overview of the book that you're reading.
Okay.
And it doesn't disappoint. It really, really doesn't. The next chapters that we're going to be discussing now are breaking down more elements of health. So we may not hit them all in this episode, but in this part of this book that we're talking about right now, but it's going to keep going further. So this book, I don't even think I'm halfway through it yet. So I'm close.
Wow.
I'm very, very close. Well, granted, I did tell you, I don't know if I told the readers, that there's a Q&A in chapter 18. And then there is, I don't want to say, probably the last 6th of this book are recipes. So I'm actually looking forward to doing some of the recipes. And I do a lot of the juices and smoothies now. So did I learn it from this originally? Maybe. Maybe. I was young. I was probably 22 when I read this book. And I think that's kind of when it was in its heyday. And you know what? Now I remember. I was a waitress. I don't even think I was 21 yet. I was a waitress at Chili's. Yep. And I think I was probably second year college. And one of my coworkers, she was probably 3 or 4 years older than me. She was eating like this. And I took notice because she was doing it at work. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she talked about the book. And then somebody else was like, oh yeah, I read that book too. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to read this book. So yeah, that's how I came about it.
That's good. I've actually started a couple other people reading this book already that I've been discussing it with, because it's something that I talk about regularly now, just because it's got my interest peaked. That's for sure.
You're noticing differences, I believe you've said.
Yeah, I have noticed some differences, but I'm also, one of the things that I'm noticing right away is when I don't follow what I'm, what the recommendations are right away, I'm noticing that my body's becoming much more sensitive, or I shouldn't even say that my body's becoming more sensitive. I am becoming more aware of what my body's telling me. So when I
Ooh.
don't follow what the rules basically are around how you should be eating, I'm noticing it right away, the impact, and I'm able to recognize it because I know, what they've already brought it to my attention. And once things get brought to your attention, it's very hard to ignore it. And that's what I'm finding. So the one thing that I'm religiously doing, no matter what, is I am only eating fruit between, from the minute I wake up until noon. And I'm not eating fruit with anything else. That I've stuck religiously with that. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. So, and then my lunch, my afternoon is pretty much just vegetables.
Okay. Yeah, and that's following along. So I'll tell
Yeah.
you what I'm doing.
Okay.
And then I think we should jump in so we don't bore
Yeah.
the readers on our
Let's
lives.
do it.
But what I'm doing is mostly because I am attempting to hit a certain protein number daily, which is significantly difficult for someone that doesn't eat, animal meat. And, like I'd like bacon, but I probably don't have it very often at all. So I'm not going to sit here and eat bacon to fulfill that need. So I'm not vegan, but I'm what they call like lacto-ovo, right? Or pesco-lacto-ovo. I don't know. It doesn't even really matter. I like to eat what agrees with my body. And then I'm kind of careful about bottom feeders. So like oysters and shrimp and things like that are like the filters. Like, why do we eat those? I always wonder. Okay, so anyways, the difference that I am making, and it's because it's agreeing with me, is I decided to do with the fruit until noon a vegan protein powder scoop with my greens. So I can take my greens however I want to, but it's just something I religiously have done forever and ever and ever. But then adding that new protein thing to try to up my protein daily, that's the only difference. So it still feels really good. I'm still starving by lunch, but yeah. But there's no fruit in the house, man. I'm eating it all. I'm so hungry.
The good for you. So you're into the next part basically in your book. Now, I don't know any of the information that you're about to talk about. So educate me.
Okay, so chapter 5 starts off basically talking about the introduction of the elements of health. So it goes into really great details around the air that we're breathing, the water that we have in abundance all around us, and the importance it is, to our bodies, and then the food. So there's obviously more elements to health. It will eventually go into some exercises, sunshine, loving relationships, cleanliness, pleasantly. It's going to hit on all these things. But as far as I have gotten would be, this first chapter is like, let's just step back and again, remind ourselves of the marvel of this body. It is just amazing what it does and how we mistreat it and how it still does what it does. Okay. And again, really good reading. And I do like in this book how he writes, a page and a half and then she writes a page and a half. And I can't say that it's for every chapter, but definitely for chapter 5 for sure. And then it jumps into talking about air. And it's interesting. I'm like, well, how in the world could you fill an entire chapter about air? And they do. And so it's a really good reminder. They do start off each chapter with like, well, we need to understand that we can't live without air. Okay, so it's important. So cleanliness is important. And then it talks about what oxygen does, its responsibilities in the body. Cleanliness of air is really, really important. And, one of the things they threw in here, which kind of took me by surprise, but we don't think about, is that exercise is so good for us. But one of the reasons is it moves the air around. It moves the oxygen around because all of our cells need the oxygen, right?
Yes.
So the exercise is really, I think, the main thing it's doing. And so why does this surprise us, right? Exercise is good for us. Exercise is good for us. If somebody would have started teaching us that your cells all your organs, all your systems, your brain and everything needs an abundance of oxygen. And they said the best way to do that is to get exercise. And it'll significantly, that's the way they should be doing this, not for weight loss and all these different things. Anyways, I digress a little bit. The next thing that they talk about with the air is deep breathing. And they go into ways of breathing, which I find fascinating that they were talking about this then when they wrote this. And I think this was like, I think this one here was in the 80s. I think yours was in the 70s, but that doesn't matter very much. But that it talks about when you breathe like abdominally versus through the upper chest, what that actually is doing with the oxygenation in your lungs. So I literally have been focusing on doing an abdominal breath versus the shallow chest breath, which they say we do when we're having anxiety and things like that.
Right. And I did learn that in one of the most recent classes I had taken with Svetlana Newsom in how to breathe properly. She taught us that. And it was breathing through the belly first and then in through the chest. So that's interesting. I'm going to be very excited to read that. So what are they suggesting for breathing that way? Is it just through the belly or is it through the mouth, nose?
Well, they're just really concerned about just making sure, first of all, like to attempt to focus on the abdominal part. And then if you want to do really deep breathing, it's, and Svetlana definitely has talked about that. I've also been taught by her, but is to breathe in through the belly and fill it and then finish with lifting the chest. And then I think she likes to teach the last sip of air and just suck that last bit in so you can't, and then removing it. So I think the different teachings around nostril, mouth, in, out is secondary to the primary issue is like, let's just get as much oxygen and deep breathing, which is belly or abdomen, and then chest. Whether you want to use your nostrils or not, that's the secondary part you can work up to.
Well, and it's really about quality of air too, right? It's,
yeah.
Because if you look at some, I guess even yoga, I'm not sure if I have my facts straight on this, but I understand that you have so many breaths in your life. So it's important to make each of those breaths deep, worthwhile, life-giving versus that shallow breathing, which takes away your breaths, anxiety, fear, all that stuff, and it shortens your lifespan. That's what I understand. Now, again, how much of it's true, I don't know, but I've heard it. Yeah. What's the harm in trying to breathe properly, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. So one of the things I actually got called out on in this book was, okay, well, I know air is important. I know good air is important. And they said, I think it was Marilyn said that she was in the car and she would see people jogging on the side of the road with all, the gases coming from the cars and everything.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, I guess that needs to change because I have absolutely done that. I'm like, okay, that is true. Those of us that have jogged or whatever.
It's getting so much harder. Well, since the books were written, it's even worse because population has just increased. But with the introduction of electric cars and better bike lanes and all that kind of stuff, it should help alleviate some of it, but definitely something to consider.
Agree. And then obviously smoking, they go into the details on how horrific it is. And secondhand smoke is no better. It actually goes into all of the chemicals. There's more than 3,000 chemicals in the cigarettes. So that's interesting.
Did you ever smoke?
I did not. Did you?
I did. I quit in
I know.
August 4th in 1994, I quit. But I got to say that I used to play hockey, and a friend of mine that played hockey, very, very good hockey player. I'm not going to mention any names here, but I never understood how she could do this because she'd play a game of hockey and then get off the ice and put a cigarette in her mouth and light it up. And I would be winded for the next several hours after playing hockey. I almost had this asthmatic reaction from playing hockey because of the chemicals from the ice.
Really?
Yeah, it would take a few hours for me to stop kind of coughing afterwards. Wow. There's no way I could have breathed in a cigarette, let alone... Yeah. So anyway, just that's a sidebar. Just thought it was interesting. But yeah,
that is interesting.
It's pretty impressive what some people can learn to overcome. And again, that shows the awe of the body, that the body can really adapt. but why make it? Why not make it easier? Just appreciate your body and do what you can to make yourself feel better. That's my
It's interesting,
theory.
like maybe it was cool and then there's addictive properties to it and then you're hooked, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Well, we didn't have the little cautions and all that information back when I started. That wasn't introduced until later on.
So let me talk about this next chapter.
Okay.
And then you can jump into where you're up to. This next one's about water. So we can live, a few days, a week or something like that without water, but we can't live without water.
Mm-hmm.
So water in itself is extremely important. There's the old saying that our body is 70% water. The teeth are 10%, the bones are 13%. Cartilage itself is holding 55% of the water in our body. The red blood has 68.7%. Blood itself is 90%, so anyways, it goes in and all these different things and what water does and what water doesn't do. The fact, why is it so important to drink this? So I am going to throw somebody under the bus, sort of. I won't say any names, but there is somebody that's kind of in my family, possibly marrying into my family. That should narrow this down a little bit, who doesn't like to drink water. And so I literally was reading this about how essential water is to every cell, every tissue, the digestive process. I mean, you name it. The metabolic system of our cells. And then there was a paragraph and I took a picture of it and I texted to her and she sent me a picture back of drinking a glass of water.
So I have to reread the section in my book because there was a part in there that I read about not drinking water with meals. And it didn't really go over when you could drink water. It did touch on water, but the basis of it is really, as you just mentioned, we're built of so much water. All our cells are built of so much water. Like, we're mostly water. That's what we are. And the world is mostly water. If you were to zoom out of the world and look from the skies, you'd see a big ball of water with a little bit of land. And then they go in to describe how even carnivorous animals, when they eat their prey, they go for the high concentrated water content food first. So they'll go for the intestinal stomach contents first because that's got the highest water concentrate, because carnivorous animals don't eat other carnivorous animals. They eat herbivores. Herbivores eat fruits and vegetables. That's where the bulk of the water content is inside of the intestinal tract in the stomach. And from there, they go to the organs, which are the next highest level of concentration, then the fat, then the muscle tissue. So it's even a carnivorous animal consumes up an animal that it's killed based on water content. And the whole diet that they're talking about is water concentrated foods and eating those high concentrated water foods. So fruits are the highest concentrate of water and easiest digest. So that's the energy pyramid. That's your first level of food source. And then from there, your vegetables, uncooked, of course. And the cooking process or any kind of process removes that water content from the food and makes it less digestible and less nutritious for us. So that's kind of the whole premise. So someone that doesn't actually drink water, if they had a diet that was consumed of a tremendous amount of fruits and vegetables, I don't necessarily know that they actually have to supplement their diet even with water, actual water. They'd get it from the food. That's
very interesting.
That's my take on it, but I could be wrong in how I'm interpreting it. I have to reread it, like I said.
Well, I can tell you that it's saying at least 2 hours after a meal to wait. And if you're really thirsty, you could do small sips, but to maybe consider celery stalks or cucumber spears because they're high in water content.
Exactly.
You know what's really interesting? I noticed this, I don't know, it's probably 4 or 5 or 6 years ago, that I actually don't drink anything when I eat. And I don't know if maybe because I had read that a long time ago and I trained myself not to do it, but I literally don't touch anything. I just don't. And it
might be instinctual.
It might be, for sure. Now, afterwards, do I feel like I really need to drink something? Usually after like dark chocolate. There's something in chocolate. And I actually had to read that once. I'm like, why are we so thirsty after chocolate? And so there's a chemical in I guess pieces of the chocolate or something like that that makes you thirsty. So isn't that
Wow.
interesting?
It's very interesting.
One of the things I do want to kind of finish up on this water is the fact that not, clean water, tap water is not the way to go. A lot of people still think that where they live, that their water is super clean and pure. I would just say test it. Test your water, because if you're just still drinking out of your tap with, the environments around you getting into your water and into your land, a lot of people just don't pay attention to that. And that really can cause problems. So what do we do in your city life? I particularly like a couple different ones that you can have the whole house attached to, or just underneath, like the kitchen sink for boiling water, or drinking water, or filling your teacup, or filling your coffee dispenser, or whatever, right? But one of the things it goes into is a very interesting political fluoridation and chlorination. And I'll tell you what, this blew my mind. If you, for the book alone, read about this water part, and I'm not going to go down that avenue, and I already know where I stand with it, and I haven't read stuff outside of what all the research they're dumping in here. I got to tell you, one of the situations and the research and the chemical makeup is actually tied to arterial plaquing. I know, mind blowing. So I didn't read that in the first one.
I think I did. I think I remember it, but I have to, because what you're talking about right now, I vaguely remember, but it was a very small part of the book.
Oh no, they don't. They don't do anything small in this. Like he literally like really opens up the can of worms, and he brings out all the political stuff and the science stuff and the people that are trying to make a difference and how they get pushed down because of the money. It's the typical.
What about fluoride in the water?
Well, it's what it does, what it combines with in the water, especially chlorinated water. But
Right.
the research and the stance on fluoridation was that it was better for the teeth. But the research actually proves it when they're just going back to read their science that the research articles they wrote and the numbers and everything, it really didn't make that big of a difference.
Yeah, because I believe that when I was growing up, they did fluorinate the water where I was. And I'm pretty sure I consumed a lot of fluorinated water growing up there. Now, I moved out of that area when I was in grade 3. So I only had that access during that time. But I'm 48 now, and I don't have a single cavity. So now, is that because I brush my teeth regularly? Yeah, I brush my teeth regularly. But is it because I have strong bones? I don't know. I always attributed it to that fluorinated water, but maybe not. So
You're going to like this book.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
I'll tell you, my mom really leaned on that too. But because I was the first child and I was not having any teeth issues, but my brother, I think, ended up having quite a bit. But we were raised, in the same house and the same water and everything. And definitely do not recall our water being filtered when I was young. And I still think they're obviously chlorinating and they're doing their whatever process to clean the water to put it back out in the city. But we know not to drink the city water around here. I remember somebody telling me, it was probably a couple years ago, that he noticed that his stomach was upset when he finally figured out that it was the ice. The ice that they were using in the house wasn't as clean as the water he was drinking, and that he was so used to drinking clean water, but the ice had not been filtered. And so he just doesn't even like ice anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting because I in our old place because we just moved about a year ago, and we had a well in my old location, and I loved the water. I could just drink that like it was coming out of style. It was so good. I don't like bottled water at all. Can't stand it. It's got the soapy taste to it that I can't get over. And I'm okay with the filtered, but it's just a carbon filter that I use for the water that I have now. Gets enough out of it, and it's okay, but nothing compared to that glacier-fed well water that was just dug out of the ground. It was delicious. Best water I've ever had.
It'd be interesting to test it.
Yeah.
He's recommending distilled. And then there's this whole argument around like distill is leaching your minerals. And he's like, you guys, that's just not happening. And he goes into all the science about that. So just again, the chapter alone on water is fascinating. Now I'm halfway through the next one, so I'm going to let you take over. But the next one's food, and I already know where he's going with some of this stuff because our food is really played with.
Well, I think we will talk about that in the next episode. We'll see you then.
Thank you for joining us today. For more information about the show, as well as our list of current reads, check us out at www.theelevatedtrader.com.
Remember to subscribe and share if you found value in today's episode. See you next week.